Thank you. And thank you, Glenn, and the Jean Gebser Society for inviting me to talk at this interesting conference where people are actually probing the deep questions of existence, really. In a sense, I'm presenting like an alternative to some of the main thinkers talked about here, Jean Gebser, Teilhard de Chardin, and Sri Aurobindo. And so I will have to present my own system of thinking, and hopefully there will be some discussion as to how does that compare to the other systems. I need to correct you, Lisa. The book you showed was actually 20 years old, and what I will be talking about now is the living universe, the new theory of origins that came last year. And let me then start by sharing my screen here and see how it goes there. Okay. So anyway, the topic will be the Mayan calendar and how we can see the constructions of different states of consciousness in that system of thinking, but also then naturally the whole idea, you might say, of a construction of different states of consciousness comes from Jean Gebser's and to some extent also Sri Aurobindo. But I'd like to point out that the Mayan calendar system is sort of a scientific system. It's not philosophical. And so it really can talk about the emergence of philosophies and religions and so forth from a bigger perspective, really. When I say that it's scientific, it is primarily because the calendar contains numbers. And at least from the perspective of modern science, in order to talk about science, you really need some kind of numbers. And what this system of thinking provides is then a sort of a timeline for the various kinds of states of consciousness that several of the other thinkers have been talking about here. So, we often talk about Western thinking and so forth, while in fact we talk about European thinking. And what I am trying to do is to actually talk about what is Western thinking and find the roots in what was intellectually the most advanced of the Native American peoples. This is, I would say, the true Western thinking. And I would also argue that without including that piece of the puzzle, we will never get to any kind of cosmology that is whole. I will be very brief here about about describing the origin of this system. Ultimately, the oldest people in Mesoamerica were the so-called Olmecs, and I'm just showing here for your to get a feel of it, a picture of the big heads that these have left behind. What I want to go on to, which will play a significant role in this whole discussion, is, however, what they talked about in Mesoamerica as their supreme deity, the feathered serpent, or the plumed serpent, as it's also called. And here you can see a picture of this deity, really. It's the oldest known one, and it's from on an Olmec site. And what you can see here then is a serpent there at the back. And then you see, it seems to be like a human being that is at the bottom of the picture, and that human being carries some kind of a handbag. And the handbag really comes to the fact that this is bringing the gifts of life and civilization. And this is a fundamental aspect of the plumed serpent. The plumed serpent was the bringer of life and the bringer of civilization. And some of the biggest pyramids in the world was dedicated to this plumed serpent. And what is this then? We could say, oh, they were idiots. They didn't understand anything. Or we could say, well, maybe we're missing something here. Maybe they meant something fundamental about our existence when it comes to the plumed serpent. At the very least, they apparently thought of this deity as worthy of erecting huge pyramids in its honor. And oops, what's happening here? I can't. Okay, so now I'm going over to the Maya, and what you see here is the Temple of the Inscriptions in Palenque. And it is an interesting, very significant pyramid. What you should first of all notice is that it's built in 9 terraces, 9 levels. And these levels represented the different states of consciousness in the cosmology of the Maya. And so when a king or a shaman king in ancient times would climb these pyramids, they would basically enact the evolution of the entire universe. This particular house on the top of the pyramid is especially interesting because on its wall you have the writing of the creation story of the Maya. And what that means is that we know something about how they looked upon the universe as coming into existence. And there are a couple of different features that makes the Mayan calendar system different from others. One is that it is multidimensional. If you look at these 9 levels, they are then represented in 9 states of consciousness. Or you can also say that they represented 9 evolutionary waves. And it was actually through the interference pattern of these different waves that reality at any given time was created. And in this sense, I also do see a parallel to how Gebser saw things, that it wasn't like one of the constructions of consciousness that came and replaced the others. No, it rather was that when you climb to a higher level, or you in Gebser's system, you will probably see a new construction coming in. Then the others were put into the periphery. They were integrated, but they got less power, so to speak. And so it's multidimensional. It's based on the interference of these different states of consciousness. Secondly, and that's really a critical point, it's a cosmic calendar. So it's not based on our local solar systems or the movements of planets in this. And in this, it's completely different from all other calendars in the world, I would say. Our Gregorian calendar or the Muslim calendar, they are based on astronomical cycles, and the Mayan calendar is not. And that's, of course, should raise the question, what then is it based on? And it is based on a quantized model of the universe, including quantum leaps, as we will see. And I will just reintroduce to you a little bit then of quantum theory before we go into how the Mayan calendar was quantized and what is the meaning of that. And show here the father of quantum theory, and which in 100 years ago completely changed the world of physics, that no longer was about the solid reality, but it was very much about waves. And Planck was the one to formulate this his basic equation, that the energy of a wave is proportional to its frequency. So when you climb up, the frequencies of the waves will increase. And I should also mention in this context the Danish physicist Niels Bohr, who was the first to introduce this model of the atom, which was based on quantum leaps, something that was kind of unheard of before. But it meant that you could go from one state in an atom, and we'll see also how that applies to consciousness, without any kind of intermediary phases. It just shifts from one state to another without any long pathway between the different states. It happens instantaneously, and that was an enormous change in worldview, really, when he introduced this. Oops, no. Okay, so now, oops. So now we're coming here then to what is probably the most famous of the Mayan pyramid, the pyramid of the Plumed Serpent in Chichen Itza in Mexico. And what you see here in this pyramid is, again, that it's built in 9 different levels. Added to that, and I should say, it all leads up to the center of the universe, which is little house on the top of the pyramid. But emanating from that house, you can see the plumed serpent. And you can see on the sides of the staircase there, you can see 7 triangles of light going down into the head of the serpent, which enters the earth. So that tells us a lot about how they viewed the role of the plumed serpent. That it's something that emanates from the center of the universe, and then through a series of steps, it goes down into the earth, and or including influencing the human beings in such a way that maybe their consciousness will change. And again, it's 9 levels of the pyramid, and that is very significant, and because it's something you find in all the major pyramids of the Maya. Okay, so now we come to a little bit more of the meat of the matter. I'll briefly talk about the 4th lowest waves. There are all these people coming in. That's a little bit, sorry about that. The 4 lowest waves, or the 4 lowest states, are really biological evolution. And I'll come back to it briefly. But I will give you a little bit of the picture here of the human evolution of consciousness. And here you can say that starts with the 5th wave. The 4th wave completes the creation of the human being in a biological sense. In the 5th wave, then you can see the state of consciousness in the phase there, starting 100,500 BC. And here comes in also a significant difference from Gebser's work. Gebser talks about these different states in different ways, but there is no exact timing of when they actually appear. So what you can say here, for instance, if you go to the bottom level there, that is the state of consciousness that started 100,000 years ago. And what is interesting with this, I said the Mayan calendar system is scientific. In other words, you can match phenomena in human evolution to the various shift points, to the various activation points of the Mayan calendar waves. So if you take the bottom level there, you can say that before we have no evidence of any kind of symbolic expression or artistic expression prior to 100,000 BC. That's what archaeology tells us. Of course, if somebody finds other words, we would have to rethink a little bit about this. But basically, before that, no symbolism, no art. But after 100,000, then beginning 100,000, we are starting to see these things. The human beings that were prior to this point in time, more or less just animals, they started to express themselves symbolically. But not very in very rigorous or structured ways. You know, we can look at the cave paintings or so from France or Spain, and we'll find that they are upside down and floating and so forth. It doesn't have the structure. Then comes the sixth wave, and prior to that, we have no real civilizations. Civilizations means city or cultures organized around city life. That's what civilization means. But on the other hand, we have from that point in time in Egypt, in Peru, in Mesopotamia, and in the Indus Valley in Pakistan, we have the first civilization. And so the first, what that means is that new state of consciousness that you can see there meant the potential for human beings to develop a new creativity, a structured creativity. So again, we have this case of nothing before that, but yet a lot of it afterwards. And that became the starting point of civilization as we know it. And then comes, as you can see, a new state of consciousness that is basically darkened, starting AD 1755. And that we can say it means the Industrial Revolution. And so prior to this point in time, we really have very little of mechanical machines and certainly no use of fossil fuels. But after that, you know, the steam engine is invented, and we have had all this development. Similarly, in the eighth wave is you might say that's the digital revolution. And before that, we have no smartphones, we have no smart technologies, we have no social media, but afterwards that comes into existence. And this will all point to that these states of consciousness that people that become active for downloading at this point in time, that those states in consciousness is really what determines how human beings develop their creativity in science, in spirituality, or all these various things are being influenced by the state of consciousness that people at these different levels are downloading. I would say the ninth wave that became activated in 2011, you know, just 13 years ago, is probably the one that the most conforms with the integral consciousness that Sri Aurobindo and Ron Gebser and so was talking about. It's the wave with the highest frequency that only recently then became accessible, but it's something that people have yet not on a massive scale come to embrace or express, so to speak. But then I should say here, this is not just, it's like a biological evolution. It is also very much the evolution of humankind in its various aspects. And it's all about, based on the premise that it's the evolution of consciousness, the downloading of different states of consciousness and their continued wave-like movement into the future that determines the kind of reality that human beings are creating. I should see here. And so, yes, I took note then of Ron Gebser's he has 5 different states when it comes to the human mind. And I would say that they are overlapping, and certainly it's a very interesting topic for study to see how do they conform to these shifts in consciousness that the Mayan calendar has dated. And and yes, absolutely. If you study these, the lowest level of the pyramid here, or I should say the 5th wave, the one starting 100,000 years ago, is basically an egoless state. We know that because if we study the cave paintings that are maybe 40, 50,000 years old, we really find no human beings portrayed, certainly not any individual characters or anything like that. And, one of the things, and there would be many others that you can sort of track with the same kind of analytical mind with Gebser's system or with the Mayan calendar system, they would all point to this sort of ultimately becoming ego-free, starting with an egoless state. And then, as we saw on the pyramid of Kukulkan, it's not just one construction of consciousness that the Maya, any of these levels describe. Rather, each one of them goes through a series of 7 steps, 7 peaks here. And what I've written here is the way that the ancient peoples of Mexico would describe these different time periods. So they said that, a certain deity, god or goddess would rule a peak or a valley. And overall movement forward, new creativity would come with those time periods that are peaks. I call them here first day, second day, third day, etc., etc. Whereas the time periods that are valleys, they are like nights. They are usually much more destructive and usually not leading civilization forward. And you might say, this is the reason that they would sometimes, I don't know if you heard the fascinating stories about Cortés and Montezuma and the Aztecs waiting for the return of the Plumed Serpent. What they meant was that they were waiting for a new peak, because they knew that this is how history evolves. History evolves like a pendulum swings, you might say. And so what then how does this means that we have to sort of precisely see what kind of advancement happens at the various peaks. And I will show a couple of examples of them. And I can tell you that these are very, very precise correspondences. And this one is the first wave. This is first wave of consciousness. This is the bottom level of the plumed serpent, if you like. And what you can see here is something very, very interesting. First of all, you can see that if you look at the first emergence of life on Earth, that happened according to, the paleontologists that are studying this, that happened 3.8 billion years ago. And these are prokaryotic cells. Then you can see, and it happens exactly when the sixth peak begins here. Now, then you see when the seventh peak begins, 1.3 billion years ago, that's when the first higher cells emerge. In other words, those are the eukaryotic cells that we are built up on and most animals are. But what's interesting here is that to see that in this wave movement, the second peak coincides with the Big Bang, with the first emergence of hydrogen and helium, the first atoms in the universe. You might wonder, why is it then why there is a period before the Big Bang? Well, if you follow what's happening with the James Webb Space Telescope, there's increasing pressure to see that there must have been something before that. And if you follow this wave of the Mayan calendar, yes, there is something there, and presumably a time period when all the constants of nature, of physics and so forth were calibrated in order to produce the continued evolution of life. But what's really the take home here is that the first life and the Big Bang, that's usually by scientists presented as some kind of purely material explosion. But these are part of the same wave movement of consciousness. So if we apply the Mayan system of studying the evolution of consciousness, we can see that life in this form as singular cells actually was part of the same evolution of consciousness as the Big Bang. In other words, life is not an accident. Life comes as on a schedule. And if we then climb up to the next level, we can study the multicellular organisms. And here you can see from the very first times when these singular cells were grouping together, step by step, all the way to the mammals that we ourselves are part of. And so here we have a couple of levels of the four bottom levels of the pyramid, and it really fits. If you start to study the actual, how does this fit the timing that's given by these various Mayan waves, you find that it fits very, very well. And I should say here that Teilhard de Chardin, he had the view that there is a teleology, that there is a direction in evolution. And I think he was perfectly right on that point. And I also feel that the Mayan calendar system proves that. In other words, you can say Darwin was right in that there was an evolution. Yes, But certainly Darwin was wrong when or at least the modern neo-Darwinists are wrong when they say that this is all random. Human beings were not meant to be here. It just happened to be that through accidental mutations or something like that. The Mayan calendar system allows us to see that things come on a schedule, and that schedule then cannot be based on randomness, because then we would not eventually end up with a human being. So you might say, you can
Carl,
yeah,
I would love to go through all of the other waves with you. But I'm afraid we need to wrap up and move.
Okay. Well, if that's it, then I just show that.
Oh my goodness! Look at all this richness. Yes.
It's not the idea that there was a plumed serpent or a serpent that was the creator god was by no means limited to the Mesoamerican peoples. You find him everywhere. And what's interesting here in the center is that the serpent comes to the human mind. In other words, there is a wave-like evolution of our mind, and that is the serpent is a symbol of that. This is the same thing basically from India and China. Wow. And so forth.
All right.
I will not. I had more prepared, obviously, but since I need to wrap it up, we come to the very end and the very top. Here you see today, all of these 9 waves are active and running in parallel. And so again, I come back to that theme, is that it's not that they replace each other, they add to each other, and they create a more and more complex interference pattern. And that's where we're living in now. And,
is all of this in the book you held up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Most of it.
Why don't you hold the book up again and we'll encourage people to go read your book, The Living Universe.
Read my book. Okay. But again, yeah, this relates to Sri Aurobindo. I think that there are states here of consciousness. It's the same ones as we looked upon previously, but it just speaks about how the human relationship to the divine has been shaped by these different states of consciousness that we have downloaded in different periods of times. And so this is what you can talk about as an integral state of consciousness at the top. That is our task at the current time to manifest this. And I'm just trying to make a connection to the Christian tradition. Is the manifestation of the 9th wave the second coming? And it's a question. And here are my most recent books. So here you have The Living Universe is the new theory of origins, and the quantum science of psychedelics is also recent. They're all pretty new books. They're over the last 8 years or so. Wonderful. So okay, well, that's it, and I thank you very much for listening, and I hope it has planted some seeds of thinking.